Welcome to the Ontario Petroleum Contractors Association's 28th Annual General Meeting. The OPCA promotes the highest standards of quality, safety, and environmental protection for the petroleum contracting industry and for all types of installations and modifications of petroleum systems. We provide a unified voice for our members involved in all aspects of this work, from service stations and private fuel outlets to engineering, environmental remediation, and critical backup fuel systems. The OPCA is supported by over 100 member companies, primarily petroleum contractors and service companies, as well as associate members in the environmental remediation, engineering, and petroleum equipment manufacturing and distribution sectors. Members are represented by the OPCA Board of Directors and staff. The board works to address issues affecting the industry and guide initiatives, while OPCA staff work to implement and deploy these initiatives, including training development and delivery for OPCA's Petroleum Mechanics Certification Program, as well as provide support to members and their employees. The OPCA advocates best practices for the industry through our participation with regulatory and standards development groups working together to develop and maintain the highest safety initiatives for the industry.
Yeah, the OPCA has involved many of our board members on various industry committees with TSSA, ULC, CSA, CCME. Hopefully we'll do an update one of these days. But definitely the B139 has been the most active for the last few years. Unfortunately, the TSSA RRGs have kind of fallen by the wayside on there. They're the committees in which we're involved in actually updating and rewriting the code and interpreting different clauses to try and get a level playing field on some of the interpretations between TSSA and our people out in the field. But unfortunately, TSSA has found they're not productive for them, so they've fallen apart. But we still have the Petroleum Advisory Council. We're involved in the Training and Certification Advisory Board at TSSA, but again, it's not as active as it used to be. We're in the CSA B140 on generators, the ULC committees as well for all the flammable combustible products. So we stay very involved in all aspects of the community of the petroleum industry, I should say. We're involved with the ministry right now looking at abandoned underground tank facilities and how to manage those going forward and how to deal with the existing ones we currently have. We've been working with them for the last 2 years on that. But yeah, our involvement in those is key to be on the forefront of those changes that are coming, to be able to give our industry members heads up on what's coming down that's going to impact them and their businesses and changes going forward. So it's a very key part of what our board members do on those committees, and it just keeps us very current with who's active in the industry, from the oil company representation that's on a lot of these to suppliers and regulators as well.
A great example of a relationship the OPCA has valued is with TSSA's engineering specialist Anne-Marie Barker. Anne-Marie has worked actively with the association and our members for over 20 years, attending meetings and participating in OPCA events, and working with industry to improve regulation and public safety in Ontario. Anne-Marie's contribution to safety is unparalleled, and upon her retirement, we would like to thank her for the exceptional service to our association and to our industry.
So it's with sadness we're hearing that one of our pillars in our industry has decided to retire. I think the only person happy about it is perhaps Anne-Marie Barker retiring, but we're so grateful for Anne-Marie for the last 20, 30 years we've been dealing with Anne Marie at TSSA. She was phenomenal at mediating those issues and getting to a resolution. As far as the liquid fuels handling code, it wouldn't be where it is today without Anne Marie. We dealt with Anne Marie on the risk reduction groups for so many years. We talked every couple of weeks on issues, technical questions and that kind of stuff on things that were getting approved that weren't kind of straightforward. We offered help with her on those, but I can't say enough about Anne, and said it's going to leave a big gap in our industry to see her go, but at the same time we're happy for her that she's moving on to the next stage in her life. So thanks again, Anne Marie. It's been a great ride, and wish you all the success in your future endeavors, and we still hope to be able to see you every once in a while. Thank you very much.
While we continue to recover from a global pandemic, industries are still dealing with the long-term impacts and how it has disrupted the global movement on the supply of equipment for many businesses. These supply chain disruptions, with many causes including port congestions, factory shutdowns, and limited production, has caused industry-wide supply constraints.
This year we've continued to deal with the effects of COVID on our supply chain issues. Our largest issue in our industry right now is underground fiberglass tanks, or a year plus delivery now at best. It's almost impossible to give an owner a schedule. It's almost impossible to give an owner a cost right now, because even if we price it today, some of our pricing is good for a day, some of it 7 days, some of it 30 days. But you start that project, if you don't buy everything the day you get that project awarded, and that project goes for the next 6 months, you could have 5, 6, 7 increases in costs that you as a contractor has to absorb. So it's a major issue for the construction industry as a whole, not just the petroleum industry.
So yes, when we started to see a disruption in the supply chain last year, just in general, predominantly around electronics, but it's continued into really almost all components these days, where, you know, even the smallest of items seems to be longer lead times. So, you know, we're continuing to plan ahead and, you know, as a distributor, buy as much as we can to get ahead of it where we are hearing that our manufacturers are having issues. And a lot of it is related to the microchip. I mean, it's amazing that this little microchip is causing so many problems in the industry and everyone's industry. So we're trying our best to get ahead on electronics, but we're trying our best to get ahead on even components that are coming from overseas. And then as distribution, and we supply a lot of that to not only our own service division, but also to a lot of the contractors and service companies across Ontario. You know, we're doing our best to make sure we're giving them as much heads up as possible.
There's requests for change to products in the specs so that a product can be sourced that's available instead of necessarily the exact product specified in the contract. Owners are asking design teams in some instances to make those changes or check out those new products and see if they will work with the design specifications. Of course, there's always disputes about liability for increased costs, and we've seen quite a few of those. And in some instances, we've even seen contractors walking away from projects, and we've seen some owners canceling projects or putting projects on hold because of the uncertainty with respect to supply chain. And then lastly, we've also seen some tendering difficulties, difficulties with getting contractors to even bid or provide a reasonable bid on tenders because of the problems with contractors being able to ensure that material will be available when the project is ongoing.
What everyone agrees is to ensure your customers understand the volatility of the current market and prepare them for unexpected price increases, surcharges, and pushed out delivery dates.
So my advice to the contractors is do their best to plan ahead, look at their historical purchases, historical maintenance, whether it's for maintaining equipment or if you're building new sites, is just look at what you've done in the past and work with your suppliers to make sure that you're as well prepared as possible. You certainly can look at alternative products, but the hard part with so many of the products today is they're kind of specific. So it makes it difficult to say, well, I'm going to look at using brand A versus brand B when you've either got the standards that a certain company requires you to have, or that's the only part you can get because it's a specific component for that product. Especially in electronics, it makes it difficult with that. I mean, there is some rebuilders out there, but the problem with rebuilders is it's not always made to the current standards of the original equipment manufacturer, but it is an alternative. And I think you have to be honest and open with your customers, the contractor's customers, and let them know the difficulties you're facing. And sometimes they may have to make that decision: is do I use a alternative product for the sake of keeping my business running versus waiting a long lead time for that other product? And you may have to take that alternative product and then replace it later.
Creating a long-term plan and negotiating with clients up front based on unforeseen price increases and delays can help them look further ahead than they normally would, while companies do their best to meet their needs throughout the project.
So what should you do for future deals? What are some tips for the future? The first thing is, of course, anytime you're bidding on a project now, you're going to know that there's some supply chain risk involved and price for that risk. And owners should be aware by now that that risk is going to get priced into their deals. And because of that, maybe you may have a little bit more leverage than before with trying to negotiate some clauses around supply chain issues. So some clauses you may want to consider is a price escalation clause. You may not get any price increase, but sometimes a price increase above a certain percentage, like 10%, owners may be willing to discuss that kind of price escalation clause. Extensions of time for true supply chain delay issues. Contractors may be able to negotiate that kind of clause. Cash allowances and contingencies, in particular, being able to move a cash allowance among different items in the contract may be something that would be helpful. And then finally, of course, the ability to change the specs if the material is not substantially different than the material specified will really be helpful if you need to source a different material that's available in the supply chain.
As our experts agree, we must all pull together to get through these challenging times while we wait for things to get back on track. The OPCA's latest initiative is to address work on large-scale diesel generator systems. Virtually every commercial, multi-residential, and institutional building in Ontario utilize a backup generator system. Generator systems are also a reliable backup power source for data center facilities and financial institutions. It is essential to have skilled people install, inspect, and maintain these systems. This initiative by the OPCA began as the demand for backup generator systems has evolved, but the availability of training and qualified people to work on these systems has not kept up with demand.
Major facilities, banks, hospitals, and that had these systems in the past, but they've evolved now into much bigger systems, critical for both life and business systems. The data centers have some of the biggest generator systems out there, whether they be for the Microsofts of the world or the banks themselves. They have some major fuel systems feeding their backup generators for that critical data. Unfortunately, industry hasn't kept up with legislation on backup generators. The B139 evolved from a residential heating code into handling backup generators, and the legislation basically says the same person who's trained to put in a home heating tank is now responsible for signing off on these multi-million-dollar backup generator systems without any training. And even on the petroleum mechanic side, we didn't have specific training on it, but our mechanics are better trained on larger fuel storage and transfer systems. So they're the ones that are typically putting these systems in nowadays. But unfortunately, we have to get an OBT1 at the end of it to come and sign off and accept this huge system that they don't really understand. So the OPCA has gone to both government and TSSA to try and get that legislation changed to close this gap in it. And then on top of working on the legislation side, the OPCA has actually developed a training program to supplement our petroleum mechanic training that is specific to backup generators, fire pumps, boiler systems. And we're trying to implement that now and get that adopted.
So there's many different iterations of how the fuel gets to the generator. So I started to develop designs for each of the iterations and building from one to the other, underground tanks to above ground tanks outside and so on. And the conundrum is that even within the fuel oil code, PM2s are required to work on the underground tanks, and OBT1s can't work on tanks above 5,000 liters. So the PM2 and the PM3 are required in the fuel oil systems, but then they're not allowed to do the final connection, and they're not allowed to sign off the development of that system against B139 and write a fuel delivery report. So that's really the discontinuity, where an OBT1 has to come in and review everyone else's work, where most of them don't really understand what went on.
The OPCA has also developed the program to be used nationally, where provinces can use the curriculum to fill identified gaps in their own industry and regulatory requirements.
In Alberta, we've had a real gap in oversight on installation and maintenance and of standby generator systems, and we relied on the fire code, but it doesn't do the job, and we've been looking to OPCA's manual to try and fill that void. In Alberta, we have a real issue with certification requirements for people that install systems, but also on the maintenance and inspection side. So we look to the B139 tech to fill that void.
They're too critical just to leave out there to, okay, go work on this and see if it works. If it doesn't work, and learn by experience is not a good way to do anything. So the OPCA has recognized that, and again is working with industry and the regulators to try and get that changed and close that gap.
One of the ways our industry can give back to the community is to support like-minded organizations like Threads of Life, a Canadian charity that provides families dealing with workplace tragedies with one-on-one peer support, group networking, links to community agencies, and the opportunity to promote public awareness and accountability for workplace health and safety.
Yeah, so funds raised through the OPCA golf tournament go to support a number of our programs and services, one of them being our volunteer family guides, which links a trained volunteer who has had personal experience with a workplace tragedy with another individual who's having a similar experience. So it's just a way for that person to share their experiences with someone who's been there. We also offer our Speakers Bureau program, which again, all of our speakers are individuals who've had experience with a workplace tragedy and want to share their experiences with others in the hopes of preventing future workplace tragedies.
The OPCA supports Threads of Life through our annual golf tournament each fall. In 2021, OPCA and their members raised $10,000 towards Threads of Life initiatives. The OPCA is proud to be a sponsor of such an important organization, and with our members' support, is thrilled to have raised over $50,000 to date through these events.
Programs are available to families at no charge. So for a family, for an individual or a family to attend a family forum, that's something that is paid for through support from corporations, individuals, through third-party events such as the OPCA golf tournament. So it's really critical that these events and these donations continue so that we can keep doing what we do in providing support that the families need.
The OPCA is here for our members, and we will continue to promote the best in industry standards. Subscribe to our updates and follow us on social media. Visit our website at opcaonline.org for more information. Thank you for your continued support.